America's largest theme park and safari is right here, close to home. Six Flags Great Adventure, with world-famous heart-pounding rides, family rides, even rides for little ones in Bugs Bunny.
Six Flags Great Adventure is one of the most popular amusement parks in the world, and it gets that from its vast collection of roller coasters. These rides range from intensity and age, which give the rides their own personality, along with showing how they have evolved. To start, let's take a look back at Great Adventure's first ever roller coaster.
So back when Mine Train first opened, it was a really big deal. Of course, Great Adventure opened in 1974, so having a coaster of that scale was pretty major. Coasters back then weren't as big as they are today. The biggest coaster you would have was like Matterhorn bobsleds at Disneyland, which really wasn't that big. Mine Train was definitely geared more towards families, but I know my dad, he visited the park a lot back then, and he really enjoyed it.
So I worked the Runaway Mine Train back in the 2018 season. I was a unit supervisor there, and Mine Train was one of the most fun rides I've worked in my time at the park. When you think about iconic rides at Great Adventure, often you'll think of the Mine Train. It was their first roller coaster, and it's an iconic ride that goes over the lake. The shot of it going across the lake in Fort Independence is one of the most iconic of the park. You'll always see it whenever you Google pictures of Great Adventure, and it was a great ride to work. I met great friends from my time in the Mine Train, and I still talk to them to this day.
It was seen as like the biggest coaster there. Like if you were brave, that's the ride you would go to, because there really was nothing else like it. Compared to nowadays, where of course you have giant coasters like that back there, and that totally changes the game when it comes to Mine Train. Mine Train is kind of seen as one of the weaker coasters of the park, but that's also because as the thrills have gotten more advanced as time goes on, Mine Train hasn't been seen as thrilling. Personally, I still enjoy it. I think it's a really fun ride.
And oftentimes it's people's first roller coaster, and so people have memories tied to the Mine Train. It holds such a special place in so many people's heart. Oftentimes it's people's first steel roller coaster. It certainly was mine as well, and I just love the history behind the ride.
Nowadays, since obviously Mine Train is not the forefront, it's not the major ride of the park anymore, people flock to rides like Kingda Ka, Nitro, El Toro, and now the New Jersey Devil Coaster. All those rides have definitely taken precedent over Mine Train, but Mine Train still pulls in crowds, especially on a crowded day, but you're going to see a lot more people go to the bigger rides.
So Runaway Mine Train has lap bar restraints, and this is because the ride does do a few different twists and turns that you would need a lap bar for. There's also a few hills that the lap bar is handy for to keep you in the seat. The restraints are different from other rides like Batman or Superman or Green Lantern that go over the shoulder. That's because Mine Train doesn't have any inversions. At no point does it go upside down, and so you don't need that extra shoulder restraint to keep you in place in the car, whereas on Batman and Green Lantern rides like that, obviously it's a necessity.
This year at Six Flags Great Adventure, answer the call to Batman the Ride, the only suspended outside looping nothing like it on Earth experience, not even at Disney.
Batman's a completely different roller coaster from Runaway Mine Train, of course, due to the obvious fact that riders on Batman are positioned under the track and you have those over-the-shoulder restraints because you're going upside down in such a compact layout too.
But Batman the Ride really came in as this new technology, really advanced ride, totally different than anything anyone had seen before. It was actually cloned previously. It came from Illinois and they cloned it to New Jersey, and it was hugely successful. It was extremely intense, still is extremely intense, was very smooth, and was definitely seen as one of the biggest draws, if not the biggest draw, for the park back in the 90s.
So Batman is a real standout coaster, and most people don't recognize this, but when you think about the standout revolutionary rides at Great Adventure, often you think of Kingda Ka or El Toro, some of the bigger coasters, but Batman, for its time when it opened back in the early 90s, was a really revolutionary ride.
Obviously, Mine Train was built quite a few years prior to Batman, so Batman is way more reliable and way more technologically advanced. Mine Train has simple issues, whereas Batman, if it does have issues, they're a lot more complex since the ride system is a lot more complex than that of Mine Train. But when I'm at the park, unless Batman's down for like a major technical difficulty, 9 times out of 10 you will see Batman open more often than Mine Train. And that's not because Mine Train's unreliable, it's just because as technology has progressed, the ride has gotten more reliable, newer rides have gotten more reliable and more easy to trust with regards to maintenance.
But also the themes couldn't be more different. Runaway Train is your standard Western-themed roller coaster, but Batman, in its heyday too, with its theming, really meant to take riders through Gotham City. You got to see the city of Gotham and the Batcave, and it's such an experience too in Batman for different reasons from the Mine Train.
Batman hits speeds of 50 miles an hour, whereas Mine Train is far slower. And Mine Train focuses more on slow turns, slow maneuvers. It doesn't really have many thrilling elements until you get to the end of the ride, whereas Batman, the entire way through, is extremely intense. From that first vertical loop all the way into the final turn to the brakes, you are constantly experiencing high G-forces, which is something Mine Train does not have. Batman also goes upside down 5 times. Back when Mine Train was built, inversions were a rarity, so Mine Train obviously does not go upside down at all, which is also a factor that contributes to Batman being way more thrilling than Mine Train.
And so people had never seen something like this, so the way modern thrill seekers look at rides like Kingda Ka or El Toro Great Adventure, they looked at Batman that same way when that ride opened, and it was really groundbreaking. So Batman's restraints are unique because they're over the shoulder. Obviously, you need over-the-shoulder restraints to keep you in on the inversions. There's plenty of loops and corkscrews throughout the ride that you'll definitely need that extra protection through. You also have a seat belt at the bottom of the over-shoulder restraint just to keep it in place as an extra safety precaution. Obviously, the shoulder restraint is doing the brunt of the work there.
Ignite your senses with Nitro, our biggest coaster ever. Now at Six Flags Great Adventure, the mother of all coaster parks.
Back when Nitro first opened in 2001, it was a huge coaster, not only for the park, but for the entirety of the country. It was one of the first hyper coasters ever built, meaning a coaster that exceeds 200 feet in height. And Nitro was built to eat people, to be a capacity machine, and it certainly is that. To this day, it constantly runs through people. There's always people queuing. It's one of the most popular coasters in the park, and back when it first opened, it was even more so one of the most popular coasters in the park.
The hypercoaster is such a revolution for the theme park industry. It adds another factor of intensity with heights that previously haven't been tackled.
All roller coasters across the country were competing with one another to try to be the tallest, the fastest, the biggest. And while Nitro didn't break any of these records, it was certainly a product of that mentality. All through history, coasters have slowly been getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it all leads up into the 2000s where the biggest coasters were being built. And like I said, Nitro did not break any records, but it was by far the tallest coaster the park had ever seen. In addition to that, it was the first coaster of its type in the northeast area of the United States, which also helped to contribute to its wow factor.
And really, it became the first common ride that guests could experience to go up to 200 feet, and of course, it only laid the groundwork for what was to come later on. So Nitro also features just a simple lap bar restraint, much like the Mine Train. And oftentimes people wonder how on a ride like Nitro that goes over 200 feet, can you have the same restraint as Mine Train, which is roughly 60 to 70 feet in the air. That has a lot to do with the forces you experience on Nitro and the angles at which some of the turns are. A lot of times people are a little intimidated by the fact that there's no over-the-shoulder restraint or any additional seat belts. But for Nitro, being one of the earlier installations, the design of the train allowed for just a simple lap bar restraint to be used.
Back when Superman first opened in 2003, it was kind of sandwiched in between Nitro and Kingda Ka, as not really as big of an addition as either of those two rides. However, it was still something that most people attending Great Adventure had never seen before.
Great Adventure is so fortunate to have so many groundbreaking rides in their collection, but Superman is one of those coasters that took an idea and really fine-tuned it.
It is a flying coaster, meaning that you sit below the track, but you're suspended into a position where you're actually in like a flight position. It's really, really cool and definitely unique compared to the other coasters of the park. Superman in general is a fairly tame coaster compared to the other thrill coasters of Great Adventure, but it does have one major standout element, that being its pretzel loop, where it rises up and then drops down, pinning you on your back before pulling back up. This is an element that is probably the most intense part of any ride at the whole park.
King Ka is the ultimate record-breaking coaster in Great Adventures collection, and that says a lot because there are so many record breakers and firsts of their kind in our collection. But King Ka is the king of coasters, and I believe that was a tagline the park used when the ride first premiered in 2005.
To say people were amazed was an understatement. A couple years prior, Top Thrill Dragster opened at Cedar Point, which took the height record at 420 feet and featured a really fast launch. And King Ka was essentially the exact same ride as Top Thrill Dragster, just a little bit faster, a little bit taller, and with an added hill. But people in New Jersey had never seen a ride like that before.
But people are drawn to the height of this thing. They are absolutely enthralled with the idea of going up on a roller coaster 400 feet. The idea that if you look one way at the top and you see Philly and you can look the other way and you can see New York City is such a huge draw for people. And there's consistently long lines year in and year out for King Ka. And it's Great Adventure's ultimate record breaker. People are drawn to this thing. People come to Great Adventure mostly to experience King Ka. Of course, they want to experience the other coasters, but King Ka is the ultimate draw at the park.
So the thing that makes King Ka so different from the other rides and its insanity factor is its launch. It features a ridiculously fast acceleration. 0 to 128 miles an hour in 3.5 seconds is something no other coaster at the park can do.
Most people don't know what an acceleration that fast is like. You can't even get close to that in a car. If you do, you're probably getting a speeding ticket. But people are absolutely blown away by the launch system, and plenty of people too ride for the chance at a rollback. The idea that if the train doesn't gain enough momentum in the launch, they'll be spiked up the tower and they might come back. It's all a safe system as well, and the ride will reset itself, but people do ride just for that chance.
King Ka is definitely one of the more polarizing coasters of Six Flags Great Adventure. When you're looking at a ride like Nitro, that's a ride everybody can enjoy. They know what they're getting into with that ride. It's very smooth, very fun, not super aggressive. Then you look at a ride like Batman the Ride that everyone who knows what they're getting into with that ride enjoys. It's very intense and also features inversions. But then a ride like King Ka, a lot of people have different expectations when they go into it, and a lot of those expectations kind of get tampered by the roughness of the ride.
Each roller coaster at Great Adventure brings something different to the table. When you ask people who are fans of amusement parks and travel around the country and the world about their favorite parks, they mention Great Adventure for having such a well-balanced lineup. But personally, of the rides we mentioned here today, Nitro is one of my favorites in the park. I love the airtime aspect. It's always intense, and depending on where you sit, you're getting a different ride experience. I personally prefer the back.
I'd say my favorite of these is King Ka. King Ka offers an experience that pretty much no other coaster can replicate, especially at Six Flags Great Adventure. That incredible launch with that really great top hat and the sense of speed overall makes it one of my favorite coasters that I have ever ridden personally.
After hearing about all these standout attractions, it becomes obvious that they are indeed different from one another and show that the engineering of how roller coasters thrill people has evolved over many decades. With that being said, there is no telling what roller coaster manufacturers will do next.